Here on Daf Ayin Beis Amid Beis, we started the Rashi Dibra Maskal Yotzar Rosha, and I have something to add. So, what's Yotzar Rosha? The Gemara quotes a Mishnah in Olos with regard to a situation in which the ubar is endangering the life of the mother, and if the situation is such that the ubar is still an ubar, then we'll kill the ubar in order to save the mother. But Yotzar Rosho, then Ein Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh, we can't choose one nefesh over the other. So if you look at Rashi, we mentioned it more than once. Rashi says that Kol Zman Shelo Yotzar La'aver Olam Lav Nefeshu. You remember that Rashi? Rashi's holding that the uber is not a nefesh. We went a few times. Yeah, well, a few times, and we even suggested a possible nafkamina in a scenario where we could actually save someone's life by killing the uber. In utero. Right, in utero operation. Yeah. And we pointed out last time that the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim says that a guy that kills an uber is chayav misa, which would seem to indicate that an uber is a nefesh. But I want to share with you another Rambam that I found that I think is even a better proof. And this Rambam is in Perek Beis Hilchos Rotzeach, Halacha Vav. The Rambam says, Echad hahorig es hagadol, o es hakoton ben yomo, ben zocher ben nekeva, harezen nerag olav, im horig bizodol. And so far, so good.
Yeah.
You know, there's no difference between what age or even a baby that was just born today. The Rotzeach is chayav misa. Yeah. If he did it b'zod. And then the Rambam adds ogole im harik b'shod. Okay then? Yeah. Now here's the next case. This only applies, meaning that you're chayav for tzitcha if you kill a ben yomo, right, a newborn baby, shekolu lo chadoshav, it was a 9-month-old baby. Aval nolad lepochos mitesha chadoshim, if it was born before 9 months passed, harehu kid nefel, then until the Rambam says, Ad sheyisha shloshim yom, for the first 30 days, he's like a nefel. Again, he's not a nefel, he might be a nefel. We don't know if he'll survive or not. It'll take 30 days until we can determine that. But ahargo b'toch shloshim yom, eino nerag olav. What is the Rambam implying when he says eino nerag olav? I would go a step further. He's chayav misa, but we can't put him to death. And the Rambam is very meduya because he always differentiates between a case of patur, a case of nerag, and in the middle a case of eino nerag, which means that he's really chayav, but we can't put him to death. So, for example, the Rambam will have here in this parak a case of gram ritzich. You know, you tie a person down, and the sun beats him, and he dies. He explains, or a train comes and kills him. So the Rambam is going to say eino nerag, but we're always going to interpret eino nerag as not that he's patur, but that we can't put him to death. Right. And that's that middle category, which, on the one hand, he's chayav misa. There's no tour here. You could have cases where he's patur misa, but here he's chayav misa. But yet we can't. Our hands are tied.
So when it comes to Shabbos, when it says patur, then also lost.
Yeah, in the case of Shabbos, patur means something else entirely, and as the Rambam himself indicates at the beginning of Hilchos Shabbos, that whenever I say patur, it means it's awesome rabbanan. But in Hilchos Ritzich, when he says eino nerag, that means he's really chayav misa. Now let's take the case of an ubar. An ubar is not worse than lo kol lo chadoshim. What do I mean? If lo kol lo chadashav is chayiv misa, just nerag, then the same thing should apply to an ubar. Because again, we talk about an ubar that is not becheskes nefel. So here he's killing someone which is kid nefel. We don't know, is he a nefel? Is he going to survive? Is he not going to survive? In the case of an ubar, I have no reason to doubt that he's going to survive.
But isn't each side, when he goes out of the womb, that's the better side than was in the womb?
Right, after he pops his head out, he's a full-fledged Yilud.
Right.
And then the Rambam is going to tell you that if you kill him, you're chayav bisa, but it depends on whether kol lo chadash. What I'm trying to point out is that an ubar is even worse than this case of kinefel. Because in the case of kinefel, you really don't know whether it's going to survive. In the case of ubar, I have no reason to suspect that it's not going to survive. And if you're chayav bisa, you're really suffik nefel, then how much more so in the case of an ubar?
No, but you're saying that the uber becomes a suffik nefel after it's born, and then after there is a...
No, that's because lo chadashav.
If lo kol lo chadashav, it's a suffik nefel. But let's take a case of an uber of kol lo chadashav, right? The uber is about to be born, and it's already 9 months since conception. In that case, it's not even a suffik nefel.
Right.
So again, if you want to tell me that he would not be put to death for killing the ubar, that I could accept. He's not yet a yilud, but he would be chayav misa with a kal v'chomer, I think, from the case of a suffik nefel. And this is the Rambam l'shitaso that an uber is a nefesh. So we can put together 3 different Rambams now, and they all, I think, are consistent. One Rambam would say that we can violate Shabbos or Yom Kippur for the sake of a nefesh, of an ubar. Number 2, a guy who kills an ubar is going to be put to death. A Yisrael who kills an ubar will not be put to death, but he's chayav misa. And all this is because the Rambam Shita is that an ubar is a nefesh. And therefore the Rambam in our Mishnah in Olos is in a bind, because why is it that we kill the ubar? The ubar is a nefesh. He can't accept Rashi, and that's where he comes up to with the halacha of a rodef b'shevi altas. And in the context of a rodef b'shevi altas, we can kill the rodef if he's not a nefesh gomer. Once he's a nefesh gomer, then you're only trying to save the nirdav. But now in this case, ain't doch a nefesh b'nei nefesh, as we discussed the great part. Okay, then so that's I wanted to add this Rambam. So that in virtue, how do you say in virtue? No,
in utero.
In utero. In that in utero case, I don't think the Rambam would allow you to kill the.
No. We're saying for Yerusha.
Oh, in Yerusha?
The man died before his second war.
Well, there's a whole story about Makadish Ubar and Uber Yerech Imo and all that. I'm not sure we're going to get into that now.
Right, but I'm saying if the boy is born afterwards, does he get the Yerusha? Is he Yerech? There are like 2 boys and then the 3rd boy pops out afterwards.
Yeah, I think so.
Exactly.
Again, you have to learn Yesh Nochum, but there's a halach in Bechar that Eino Yoresh Roy Kemuchsa. If you know what I mean, he doesn't get Bishnayim on something that was not in the Rishus of the Morish at the time that he died. I don't know if that's relevant to you.
That's grandfather. That's in other words, only the grandfather's side.
Yeah. Okay, now we get back into the Rashi. Now this Rashi is going to take a stand on the issue of giving up one life to save the many. Okay then? And Rashi says that in the case of Sheva ben Bichri, they gave up Sheva ben Bichri, and the question is why? We have a principle of Ein Tochen Nefesh B'nei Nefesh. Rashi gives 2 different answers, and they're fundamentally different one from the other. The first answer is that even if they wouldn't give up Sheva ben Bichri, he would be killed in any event. So what do you gain by not giving up Sheva ben Bichri?
Right.
On the other hand, by giving up Sheva ben Bichri, you save the entire city. And that's why it was mutter. So it means, according to Rashi, in his first pshat, you could give up someone who's going to die in any event in order to save the men. Then Rashi gives a second answer. And he says, that the status of Shem ben Bichri was that he was a Morid b'Malchus. And a Morid b'Malchus is Chayav Misa. Now in Morid b'Malchus, you have two different stages. You have the final stage, which is called the Gemar Din. So we took this rebellious person to a court and we went through the entire system with Eidim and so forth. And there was a Gemar Din. At that stage, he's definitely what you call a Gavra Ketila, as we discussed in the past. So that by giving up Shem ben Bichri, assuming Rashi means Morid b'Malchus with a Gemar Din, then once he's a Gavra Ketila, you're not really involved in Ritzicha, because in the case of a Rotzeach who kills a Gavra Ketila, it's not that he's Eino Nerak, but then he's Potter.
It's like you give him a conflict.
This is, but I'm not sure that Rashi means that there was already a Gemar Din. Because in the case of Shem ben Bichri, to the best of my knowledge, they never actually brought him to a court. But I think that Rashi's saying that there's an earlier stage in which he becomes a Morid b'Malchus, and he's already considered Chayav Misa, and I don't know if he's called a Gavra Ketila. So what I want to leave is an open question, because this requires a lot more work. What is a Morid b'Malchus, and at what point? Because Morid b'Malchus is not like anyone else who's Chayav Misa. Anyone else who's Chayav Misa is only after Gemar Din. You can't make him into a Gavra Ketila before Gemar Din. But Morid b'Malchus has a different status.
What's all status of Uriah?
I didn't get
Uriah.
Who?
Uriah.
Yeah, again, I don't know if Uriah Chiti has a monopoly of being a Morid b'Malchus, but okay. So let's go back to Rashi's first explanation of Shem ben Bichri, namely that he would have died anyway. So what I want to learn with you is a Tosefta. I quoted it last week. I want to quote it again. And there's also Yerushalmi. And all of this is in Masechet Trumos, Perek Ches. And we're going to compare the Tosefta to the Yerushalmi. Usually, there's no discrepancy between the Tosefta and the Yerushalmi. But here, I think, is the exception to the rule. So the language of the Tosefta is as follows. Seah shel bnei Adam, she'amru lehem goyim, tnu lanu echad mikem v'nargehu, v'im lav hareyonu hargim es kulchem. Now, what implication do you get from the words Harei Anu Hargim Es Kulchem?
Including him.
That whatever guy you give up, he's going to die anyway. Correct? Mm-hmm. Says the Tosefta, Harei Yehargu Kulam V'al Yibsu Lahem Nefesh Achas B'Yisrael. It's against Rashi's first answer. Because what it means is that you can't even give up one person who's going to die for the sake of the entire tzibur. A pella of halach, we're going to try to analyze that. But that's what it says in the Tosefta. Then it says, Aval im yichduhu lahem, kegon sheyichdu l'sheva ben bichri, yidnu lahem v'al yehargu kulam. Why did they give up Sheva ben Bichri? According to the Tosefta in Trumos, after all, we don't give up one to save the entire community, even if that person will die anyway. So what do we do with Sheva ben Bichri? And the answer is Yichdu. They asked for him. And once again, we have to figure out what's going on over there.
Sounds like what they're not allowed to do is to choose. You can't pass judgment. You can't choose.
Right.
If someone's chosen for you and he's going to die anyway.
It's like you can't play God. My chazis.
Yes.
Who says his blood is redder than his? So if somebody steps in, I was always wondering, according to Tosefta, could we we take lots, and the one who gets the short end,
No, the equal is similar to Katila, because you're saying that he's already designated as that. I'm saying it's a step back, but it's some kind of analogy.
But apparently they can't get to him unless we give him up.
Yeah,
so I don't know if that's a Gavra Katila, but the Pella is, if you're going to call him a Gavra Katila because the Goyim singled him out,
well,
then what you're really saying is that the Goyim are going to determine whether, the status of a person. That's a Pella. But then the Tosefta quotes Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda, but Medvar Mamur Bizman Shehumi Bifnim, Behemi Bachutz, Al Bizman Shehumi Bifnim, Behemi Bafnim. So again, if he's Bifnim and they're Bachutz, so then the halacha is that they can't give him up unless he was special, he was singled out. But he says, Rabbi Yehuda, Bizman Shehumi Bifnim Vehemi Bifnim, if they're all equal and they're all going to die, Hoil Vahu Nerag Vehem Nerag Yitnu Lahem V'al Yehargu Kulam.
That's like Rashi here.
Exactly. Rashi is reflecting the Shita of Yehuda. So in the case where they're on the outside and they're going to dig him up, so that means that there is some sort of possibility that he would survive. But in a case where they're all on the same level, they're both bifnim, let's say, and therefore they're all going to die, say, you'll chop a hand grenade, whatever it is, then give up one person.
That's named or unnamed?
Even unnamed. Review doesn't require a name.
Right, if you don't like Rashi.
So Rashi, I don't know why Rashi chose the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda, but if you ask me, again, this is a funny way of saying it, but it's a great kula. Because on an intuitive level, logically, the guy's going to die anyway. So we all have to die. Like, let's cut our damages, cut our losses. And now I want to quote to you the Yerushalmi in Truths. The Yerushalmi.
Oh, sorry. What would you hold if the person was named, but he was the chutz of everything?
Once he's named, then the assumption is he's going to die.
You can attack him as well.
They're going to find him somehow. And if he's going to die anyway, plus he is singled out, then even the Chachamim, the Tanakama Rabbi Yehuda would say, since they singled him out, you can give him.
Right. Also, I'm saying.
And then the Tosefta quotes Reb Shimon, and Reb Shimon says it all depends upon whether he's Chayav Misa or not Chayav Misa. But listen to the language of Yerushalmi. Seos b'nei Adam shayu mahalchim b'derech hogu lehem goyim v'amru tnu lanu echad mikem v'narago so v'imlav hareu nehorgim es kulchem afilu kulam nerogim lo yimseru nefesh achas miYisrael. So far, the Yerushalmi, without quoting Rabbi Yehuda, agrees with the Tanakama against Rashi. And now we have, the evidence is piling up against Rashi. Because Rashi's first answer was that you can give up someone if he's going to die anyway. And both the Tosefta and the Yerushalmi say, no. Even though Yehargu Kulam, al yimsu lev nefesh achas b'Yisrael. But then the Yerushalmi says the following. Yichtu lahem echad, kegon Sheva ben Bichri, yimsuru oso v'al yehargu. Okay then? So we have now Rashi's second, no. We have now Rashi's first answer, but only in the case of Yichtu. So as Rashi says that if they're all going to die, including the one that they would choose, can't give them up. But in the case of Yichtu, then you could give him up, and that Shita is accepted by the Yerushalmi and Trubus. Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish, v'hu she'yehei chayav misa kishev ben Bichri. Even in the case of Yichdu, we're going to need that he's chayav misa. That's against Rashi.
But
Rabbi Yochanan,
like married Malchus type of Misa?
Correct.
Oh.
And then Rabbi Yochanan says, Afal Pisha Eno Chayev Misa, we can give him up. So it means that Rashi is Mekil like Rabbi Yochanan against Reish Lakish. Because Reish Lakish says that Afilu Yichdu, you can't give him up unless what? Unless he's Chayev Misa, Kishem Ben Bichri. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, you don't need Chayev Misa. All you need is Yichdu. So let's go over Rashi one more time. Rashi says in the first answer, Dafilu lo masru lo payed nerag. Okay. Inami de morid b'malchus. No, it's Rashi saying that only if he's chayav misa, because he's a morid b'malchus, then you can give him
The second.
the second. But in the first answer, he doesn't say that yichdu is enough. Let's look
But he didn't say yichdu at all.
He doesn't even mention yichdu. And the absence of yichdu in Rashi gives you the impression that yichdu is lo ma'ila v'lo morid. It wouldn't change the halach.
It has to be that he would be killed anyway.
Correct.
Like Rabbi Yehuda.
And Rashi accepts Rabbi Yehuda. But in yichdu, Rashi seems to be going, again, by implication.
Like the second. First answer like Rabbi Yehuda, second answer like Rish Lakish.
Right.
So in a sense, Rashi is a mekil and a machmir. He's accepting Rabbi Yehuda that if he's going to die anyway, you could give him up. Tanakama in the Tosefta said no. Al yimsu am nafesh achas. So without any qualifications. But on the other hand, Rashi's a gevaldige machmir, accepting Reish Lakish against Rabbi Yochanan.
Which Tana Rabbi Yochanan Rish Lakish is going from?
The Yerushalmi quotes this machlokes because all we had before the machlokes is yichduhu kigon sheva ben bichri yimsu also val yehor. But the question now is how to interpret that. And Reish Lakish interprets it because he's chayav misa. Rabbi Yochanan says even if he's not chayav misa. So Rabbi Yochanan has this mitigating circumstance.
They're arguing how to explain that Bryce of Yerushalmi quote.
So whereas Rabbi Yochanan is sort of mekil or matir, in the case of yichdu, Rashi by omitting yichdu seems to reject Rabbi Yochanan and accept Reish Lakish, who says that yichdu is not enough. You need yichdu plus chiyuvus. Okay, now let's try to understand this halacha of yehargu kulom val yimsu lahem nefesh achas misra. You see, in Reish Lakish's frame of reference, which is the second answer of Rashi, you could talk about Gavra Ketilu. So therefore, you're not really being Moser Nefesh Achas. But in a case where he's not Chayav Misa, where Rashi seems to imply Yehargu Kulam, and we have it explicitly in the Tosefta according to the Chachamim. So what exactly is going on over here? You see, I would understand that there's no heter of ritzicha under any circumstance whatsoever, no matter how high the stakes are, if there's no gavra ketil. If the person that you're murdering to save someone else is ain't dochin nefesh, afilu bnei arbei nefashos, because your act is an act of murder. But what bothers my mind is that you're giving him up to the guy who's going to actually murder the guy.
Well, so you just Messiah.
It's sort of like a grandma, I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
so is this called grama?
Well,
So in other words, now we're saying that according to the Shita that the Chachamim in the Tosefta that Yehargu Kulam Al Yimsu Lev Nefesh Achas Yisrael, that if if you're a gram ritzicha, then that's called ritzicha. And there's no heter for ritzicha, even to save the men. Without getting into the issue of is he going to die in any event. Because the Tanakama in the Tosefta says, even if he's going to die in any event, Yehargu Kulam, Al Yimsulem Nefesh Achas Miyisrael. But I'll tell you why, Yechiel, I'm a little bit hesitant here to apply the principle of Gram Ritzicha and call the people a Rotzech by giving him over. Gram Ritzicha makes sense when there is no Rotzech. But if there is a Rotzeh, that's not called Gram Ritzicha. You already have a Rotzeh. So, for example, if I know that Reuven wants to kill Shimon, and Reuven wants me to give him a gun, is that called Gram Ritzicha? I mean, let's say Reuven could not possibly kill Shimon without that gun. So you might say, well, that's Gram Ritzicha.
I agree with that.
It's
not Gram Ritzicha. Correct. Because you have a Rotzeh. The guy is going to be Chai Mishum Ritzicha.
So the same thing if you tie up Shimon.
It's one of the shepherds. I don't have to tell you. What?
The same thing if you tie up Shimon, you put him in front of Reuven and
correct. But if you put him up
in
in front of a lion or a son or a locomotive, then it's no Rotzeh. So then you're utilizing the forces of nature to put a person to death. That's called Gram Ritzicha. But if you're only, shall I say, what word do I want to use? Facilitating. I was just about to say, facilitating a murder on the part of a murderer. That's like Gram Ritzicha.
Accessory, right?
And this is what Reb Chaim says about Tosas in the case of. We didn't get to it yet. Did we get to Esther before Hesia? That also we haven't gotten to it. That's, I think, on Ayin Hey. So Tosas says that the principle called Karka Olam, if you're familiar with that, applies even Ritzicha. Still says, what's Karka Olam and Ritzicha? How can you be in Arayas? I understand you could be Karka Olam, and Isha could be Karka Olam. But how do you have Karka Olam Ritzicha? Tosas says, Kigon, they force him to allow them to throw his body onto a tina. And his weight coming down on the body will kill the tina. So that's called Karka Olam and Ritzicha. So Reb Chaim says he doesn't understand the Tosas. One of the rare cases where Reb Chaim, comes out against Tosas. And he says, that's not that's not Ritzicha. That's not Ritzicha at all. The person who throws him onto the baby, he's the Rotzeh. You can be a Chetz or an Evan in the hands of the Zorek, but you're not doing the Ritzicha. There is a Rotzeh. So don't tell me that this is Ritzicha b'Shem V'Altas, Ritzicha of Karka Olam. You're not a Rotzeh at all.
He's a weapon. I mean, a weapon used by
his body becomes like he's a human cannonball, but he's not a Rotzeh. There is a Rotzeh. So you're playing the role of a cannonball. He's shooting you out, as a cannon. He's a Zorek. So Reb Chaim says that's not Ritzicha. You want to give me a case where he violates Ritzicha? B'Shem V'Altas, that's not a violation of Ritzicha. In the case of Arayas, the Torah says, "V'nichrusu anafashos elu," meaning that she's considered a participant, even though she's passive, in Arayas, and she'll be put to death. But not in Ritzicha. There's someone else doing the Ritzicha.
He's the Ritzicha. If he pulls off a building onto someone, that's honest anyway. But I'm saying, is there elements of Ritzicha there that he kind of prevents it? I'm saying
maybe that's a sugya in Bava Kama called Isha Mishum Chitza. I don't want to get into that because then I'll have nothing to talk to you about when we get to the Ayin. So I want to tell you an amazing chiddush of Reb Chaim. Although I don't usually like chumras, but this is a gewaltige chumra, and this is Reb Chaim. The Gemara says about Metzia, so Rabbi Akiva says, and Ben Petura says, split the water. And they're both going to die. So Chaim says, why can't one of them take the water? Going to Ben Petura. So Chaim comes up with an unbelievable chiddush, and he claims that even Rabbi Akiva accepts this chiddush. That you can't save yourself if somebody is going to die as a result of the Hatzolah. Listen carefully, Rabbi. This is not Gram Ritzicha. We're talking about Hatzolah at the expense of someone else. Which always reminds me of that case in the Holocaust, where he wants to bribe, he smuggled out something from the camp, from Varsha, wherever it was, and he wants to bribe the capo, knowing full well that the capo has to fill a quota, and someone else will do.
I thought your last was random.
So wait, so listen to what Reb Chaim says about Ben Petura. Reb Chaim says about Ben Petura that if you drink the water, or for that matter, half the water, you're going to cause the death of someone else. The water represents the life force of someone else. So by taking the water, you are saving yourself at the expense of someone else. And that you can't do. Comes along Reb Chaim with an unbelievable chiddush, and he says that even according to Rabbi Akiva, you're not allowed to save yourself at the expense of someone's life. But Rabbi Akiva is talking about a case where you have a keton shomayim. It's your water. You don't have to give up your water because for ima. But if, let's say, there's water and we both have access to the water, no one owns the water, then Rabbi Akiva would agree with Ben Petura, because for ima is a special halacha that allows you to save yourself at the expense of someone else, but only because you have possession of the water. And Reb Chaim derived this conclusion from our Tosefta that we're studying now. Gehargu kulam fal yimseru achas mehem achas mi Yisrael. Why? I'm not the Rotzeach. The Goyim are going to be the Rotzeach. But by giving over that person, I'm saving myself. It's a Maisat Sola, which will end up with his death.
What's the getter of the Easter of a Maisat Sola? What's the Avera of Hatzolah?
If it's Hatzolah at the expense of someone else's life, then it comes under, what should I say, a getter of Ein Dochin Nefesh B'nei Nefesh. You want to save yourself, somebody else is going to die as a result. You're choosing your life over here. Rabbi Akiva says, Chayecha Kodman. No, says Rav Chaim. Chayecha Kodman is because you're holding on to the water. We never found Rabbi Akiva to disagree with Ben Petura if the water, Rabbi, I'm telling you, this is so revolutionary because it means if there's a life, what's it called, a life boat? I didn't mean a boat. I mean, what's that round,
a life preserver, a life preserver.
And there are two people swimming. And you and I'll say, well, who's going to get there first? Kol HaKodim Zocha. And he's going to save himself. But Reb Chaim is saying that the moment you grab onto that lifesaver, when the other guy's trying to get it first, you are saving yourself at the expense of his life.
You're taking possession also before you die. So you have possession of the kisser.
You're asking, would Reb Chaim agree that in this case, if I get there first, I can possess it? The answer is no. Why? Because right now, I don't have it.
They both own it.
What do you say?
You don't have to complicate that.
No, I'm just saying.
They both own it. I don't know.
Right now, I have no bailus over this object that's going to save my life. And therefore, we both have equal rights to that life preserver that our lives are dependent upon. That's like the case of the Mayim without having possession of the Mayim. And therefore, Reb Chaim would say, because you're going to take the thing and save yourself, and that represents his life force. So that you're choosing your life over his life. And Ein Dochin Nefesh.
Is that every situation, maybe if there's an external force that is doing the research, I'm saying like if you in the Holocaust and if you escape your bank, then the whole bank gets killed. You're not allowed to escape. That's it.
That's what Chaim is saying.
It's not because it's not a natural thing. It's someone else doing the research.
It doesn't matter because Reb Chaim based it on this Tosefta. And Rashi accepted the Tosefta. Because Rashi holds that Yamusu Kula Val Yimsru Lehem Nefesh Achas Miyisrael. Now, in a case where everyone's going to die, then Rashi would say something else. But I'm talking about a case where it's either your life or his life, one or the other. We both can't survive.
No, what about it's a matter of time? Like the Holocaust.
He'll die later on, you mean?
He'll die a week later, probably.
What do you say? He'll die when?
A week later, 2 weeks later.
You don't know that?
I would think, right now, I would say to you, it's the same.
Well, I think
as long as you know, if you know that you are causing his death, but not in the sense of Gram Ritzika. You're not setting it up that he's going to die. You're saving yourself with something that would definitely save his life. And as a result, he's going to die. It's way, way beyond Gram Ritzika. And it's going to apply even if there is a Rotzeh. And this is Reb Chaim's source from Rabbi Akiva. But the truth is that this Tosefta, according to Tanakama, would be a clear-cut proof for Reb Chaim. Why? Because you're going to give up someone, he's going to be killed by someone else. What sense does that make? We're going to die anyway. He's going to die anyway. Yehargu Kula. But the answer is you're not allowed to do an action that sets up him as the one who's going to die. Even though you're doing it B'Torah Satzol.
But still, he's going to be killed anyway. He's going to be killed anyway, so it's not Doch and Nefesh.
It's Doch and Nefesh B'nei Nefesh in the sense that you're actively involved. Now, in the case of Yehudu, so once again, we're going to ask the question on Reb Chaim then. According to those like Reb Yehuda or the Rashi or the Shita of Reb Yochanan in the Yerushalmi, you're allowed to give him up. Yehudu. Why? Again, you're saving yourself by giving up someone to die. So here I'd like to quote the other Rambam that we spoke about. Do you remember the case of the Masa? In Hilchas Kobol Masa Kerches, where it's a very heavy weight and the boat is going to sink. And the Rambam says that Masa is what? A Rodev. But we have now a concept called a Rodev B'Shev V'Altas. He's not actively endangering your life. But in reality, he is endangering your life.
The guy specified he's like a Rodev.
I mean, the Pella is that it's the guy who decides he's a Rodev. But the honest truth is, Rabbosai, I think it's wrong. This last piece. Everything I think I said, that's Reb Chaim. But do you remember the Rambam had a case where the Anas was threatening the life of the Jews if they don't give up some merchandise that they're after? You remember that case? Also in Chobol Maaseh. And the Rambam in that case said that the Masa is not a Rodev. And he who destroys it by giving it over to the Anas is going to have to pay damages. So we explained, if you recall, that there you cannot call that object a Rodev because there is a Rotzeach. The Anas is an active Rotzeach. It's not like the case of a Masa where you have a rodef for shevi altas, but you don't have a rotzeach. So then you could classify a rodef as a rodef, even though he's shevi altas. Whereas in the case where the anos comes, we have a rodef already, so we can't have a second rodef. Here also, in the case of yichdu, you have a rotzeach. So it's not similar to the case of the masa, but rather similar to the case of the anos. So I wanted to explain that maybe the Rambam holds that yichdulo, that person becomes a rodef. I don't think it's correct. He would, if we could equate it with the case of the masa, he would be a rodef b'shevi altas. But if we equate it with the case of the anos, the Rambam says he's not a rodef. And why? Because the anos is the rodef, for we have a clearly defined, specified rodef. And here too, we have a rodef. So let's do a little bit of a chazor. I just want to make sure, at least for myself, that we have it all down.
We still know how Reb Chaim would understand.
Yeah, still don't understand
But explain the din of yichdu. We don't know that.
Yichdu, I don't have an answer for you.
That's our homework answer.
No.
So again, Rashi doesn't mention anything about yichdu. And Rashi would certainly say that you can't choose one person to save the many. If that person is bifnim, if he's, let's say he's not going to die. The Tanakama in the Tosefta holds kulam yehargu v'yimsulem nefesh achas miyisrael. And we suggested that the possible explanation that underlies the Chachamim, because intuitively, what do you gain? And there is a Rotzeach, is based on the halacha of Hatzol. That there's a limit to Hatzol. There's a boundary beyond which even Hatzol is not permitted. And that's where that Hatzol represents the death of someone else.
But if you kill someone because you're not allowed to kill that because of the three things. But if you do, then you possibly. It's honest.
That's a tremendous machlokas rishon.
When
is Yehard Val Yavor, are you chayiv or not?
Right.
So that we'll leave for another time. But just to get back on track here. So in the Tosefta, we have the Chachamim sheet, Yehargu Kulam. And then we have Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is going to be like Rashi, that if it's Yehargu Kulam, including this person, then you give him up.
Right.
Then we have another issue about Yichdu. Rashi seems to imply, like Reish Lakish in the Yushalmi, that even in the case of Yichdu, so we suggested that Yichdu, according to Reish Lakish, would not qualify as a Rodef. Again, he's not Chayiv Misa, because there is a Rodef. There is a Rotzeh. And we explained that in the case where you're saving yourself and someone else is going to die, then Reb Chaim understands that even Rabbi Akiva would accept the position of Ben Ptura, that they should both die. So that's what we have here in this. Okay, what else? What else do we have? Yeah. Now we have a Rambam in Perek Hey Mehilchos Yisodei HaTorah Halacha Dal. Omru lehem ovdei kochavim, tnu lanu echad mikem v'nargeu, v'im lav naro kulchem, yehargu kulam v'al yimsu lehem nafesh achas b'Yisrael. Once again, the Rambam is accepting the Tanakama of the Tosefta in Trumos. V'im yichdu lahem, v'amru tnu lanu ploni onarogas kulchem, im hayu mechuyev misa keshev ben bichri yitnu oso lehem. V'ein morim lahem kein lechatchil. So who is the Rambam accepting here? The Rambam is saying that in the case of Yichdu, you can't give him up. If he's Chayav Misa, then halacha vein morin came. The Rambam is saying that we're not going to allow you to give him up, but if you gave him up, it's okay, so to speak. So the Kesef Mishnah writes, where did the Rambam get this from? So he quotes another Yerushalmi in Trumas. The Yerushalmi says in Trumas, Hahu Barnash, Havate Malchuse, the Malchus was after a certain person to put him to death. The Arak Lelud, and he runs away to Lud, Gabi Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. The Akif Malka Medinasa v'Yoevlud. He was already condemned to death by the Malchus, and Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi gave him up to the Malchus. Have Elio Rogil to Miss Galilee. Elio used to constantly show up and reveal himself to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Visu lo is Galilee. He didn't show up. Vitsam kamet somim adis Galilee. Amalei. Rabbi Elio Anovi says to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the Liltar Anom is Galilee. Diltar is someone who is a Moshe. You gave up this Jew, and I'm going to show up for you? Amalei. So Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi answers, Vilo Mishnah Asisi? Did I not do what the Mishnah says? Meaning the Mishnah means the halacha. Because this is a case of what? Of Yichdu. Not only is it a case of Yichdu, but it's even a case of a Chiyuv Misa. Amalei, Vizu, Mishnas Chasidim who? Is that the way a Chassid should act? And the Rambam takes, according to the case of Mishnah, that statement of Eliyahu Hanavi, Vizu, Mishnas Chasidim, as halacha v'yein morinken. That although, strictly speaking, you could give him up because he's Chayav Misa, and that's Reish Lakish, but nevertheless, halacha v'yein morinken. So imagine the Rambam is in the Machlokas Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan. The Rambam is even more machmir than Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish at least said without qualification, if he's Chayav Misa, give him up. The Rambam is saying no, we shouldn't pass him like that. Why? Because that's not Mishnas Chasid. So it's a pella to me that when we finally have a kula of Chayav Misa to save the city, we can't even apply that. Because it's not Mishnas Chasid.
It's more Chasidus to have the whole city be killed.
Unbelievable. You know, you get the sense that what's at stake here is like there are going to be so many situations, tragically, catastrophes like this, that like don't play any games over. You know, like oh, he's this, he's that, you do, Chayav Misa, you know, like avoid the whole thing. Let's be ready to give up the entire city. Al Kiddush Hashem. I don't know. But once again, you know, it all comes back to Reb Chaim. Because the man is Chayav Misa. Yichdu, you have all the conditions necessary. But at the end of the day, you're saving the city by giving him up.
Why is it halacha? I mean, it shouldn't just be halacha vein morin can. It should be the halacha as you can.
So I think the answer is that once he's already been condemned to death, he has some sort of a status of a Gabra Ketila. But nevertheless, you are saving yourself by giving up a Gabra Ketila. And that's us. Unbelievable. Now I want to talk to you about Yaakov Avinu. You mind? Yeah. Yaakov Avinu refuses to give BIyun. The entire Beis Yisrael, all Shvatim, with the exception of Yosef, are about to die of starvation. And Yaakov refuses to give up BIyun. It's not giving up BIyun. I mean, it's a suffix that maybe BIyun will die. Endangering BIyun. Is Yamusu Kulam Bal Yimsu Lehem Nefesh Achas Mi Yisrael. And again, it's Yichdu. I wouldn't say it's Chayiv Misa, but Yichdu. I mean, Yosef wants Binyamin.
If the trip is dangerous, then he's endangering the sons. The other brothers are being endangered by having to, right? He was worried about them dying on the road, right? So it's not just Binyamin, it's all of them.
They're definitely all going to die if they don't go. I mean, that's clear. I mean, all their
food is gone.
Their provisions are gone. Wow. So Yehuda steps forward, and he convinces Yaakov to allow Binyamin to go down. At the end, Yaakov gives his consent.
Yeah.
Why? Because one of two things. Either because we're all going to die, including Binyamin, and including you, Yaakov, we don't have any provisions. Or because it's Yichdu. Now, if we go with the first pshat, then we have a clear-cut raya in Yaakov giving his consent that if we're all going to die, then we can endanger. You see, that's the there's a leap of faith over here. It's not that we're giving up someone to die, but anyway, we're giving up someone to a danger of dying or suffer. And the final psak of Maskana of Yaakov Avinu is that we can do that because we're all going to die anyway. And the question that I have for you is, how is Reb Chaim going to understand? Because according to Reb Chaim, you're basically being matzil yourself, and someone else could die. So you could always say it's only a suffix. Maybe that's the truth. I don't know. Okay. See, I'm wondering the following. Please don't kill me for saying this, but is there possibly a difference between a Yachid and Rabbin? What do I mean? If we're going to assume, what do you say?
Like one against one is but one against many?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. What I'm trying to suggest here is that even though Yaakov at the end of the day was convinced, but that's only to save the tzibur of Klal Yisrael, would I be able to make a decision? And I'll tell you the truth, Yechiel, I'm going to even go far as to say, let's say it's one person and there's 5 people. Can I give up one person to save 5 people? Well, for that matter, can I endanger one person to save 5 people? It's quite possible that if we want to base a heter on Yaakov Avinu, again, I don't know what the rules are, if you can learn halacha from episodes in the Torah for the Avos, but let's assume for argument's sake you could. But it's possible that that's only because the entire tzibur of Klal Yisrael at that point were in danger. So we're saving the tzibur of Klal Yisrael. Any tzibur of 10 people at any time, we're going to learn from this week's parasha, is considered like a microcosm representing all of Klal Yisrael.
Similar to Esther then.
Why? Esther is also Klal Yisrael, you're saying?
Yes. It's like Esther doing Nibel. There's a whole case of, but the town does the same thing. They say, give a woman who's also called now.
One second. You're asking the following brilliant question. If we're saying now that you can... Just 1 second.
In any war, you're sending out soldiers to...
What do you say, Dave?
Any war, you're sending out soldiers to risk their lives in order to save them.
I think it's different, but it's different. I think that the war, then you are, like, it's like a situation.
Right. So
I don't know the basis, but I'm sure there's a basis.
Parsha itself. Yeah, Dovel's saying something very interesting, which I never thought about. I'm pretty sure there's an answer to you. Meaning the Klal Yisrael element would not be enough. You know, I'll tell you something else. The Gzeira of Haman came later.
Yes.
So it's a little bit tricky to say that we could allow Esther for Gilead Rayas,
Right.
assuming blah blah blah,
That's what's happening.
for the sake of Klalis, because at that moment in time,
But there was a shit,
That's what it says.
the Gemara said that she told Mordechai that at that time, right now, until now, I was going the Hepin, I'm going this, in other words. Right, now she was initiating.
Right.
Saying, now I'm giving
we
you
are surreal violent.
Right.
That's
But I'm just saying the point that it's for the sake of Klal Yisrael. I don't think that would be a consideration. Okay, what time is it now?
You know, for the the honey trap, the Mossad thing, captured.
All right, both sides. So believe Ned the next week. What we want to do is the Mishnah on Daf Ayin Gimel. At least we can say we turned the page. Okay.
Good.
So we're in attendance.
Well, makes me feel a little more important. Like, I was 25% of this year.
Okay, 7:25, not 7:30.
I know that I know.
I was not even
I'm you know,
a little uncomfortable.
I gotta keep my reputation.
The last few weeks, like I come back a couple of times, it's really weird. Like, no one of these, it's like 28.
I'm sorry about that. I was like, yeah. Yeah.